The night she signed her name on a contract she didn't fully understand, there were 3 things on the table: a glass of water she hadn't touched, a pen that cost more than her monthly rent, and the quiet, absolute certainty that she had run out of other options. Her name was Margot Fitch. She was 29 years old. She had $47 in her checking account, and a duffel bag sitting by the door of a hotel room she couldn't afford past morning checkout. 12 hours earlier, she had been standing at the front of a banquet hall in downtown Calgary, in a dress that her mother had described as the most beautiful thing this family has ever owned, watching the man she had spent 4 years building a life with step out of a side corridor with his hand on the lower back of her maid of honor. She hadn't screamed. That surprised her later when she thought about it. She had simply stood there in $260 worth of rented satin while the string quartet kept playing something from Vivaldi, and she had watched Dana laugh at something Kieran said, and she had understood, with the kind of clarity that only comes from being completely blindsided, that she had been the only person in that room who didn't know. Her aunt had known. She could tell from the way the woman looked at the floor when Margot turned around. 2 of Kieran's groomsmen had known. She could see it in the way they went very still, very careful, the way men do when they're trying not to be the one who has to deal with something. The florist, possibly. The florist had been very careful about where she arranged the centerpieces, now that Margot thought about it, always placing herself near an exit. What happened next happened fast, and also very slowly, the way car accidents do. Margot had walked to the microphone. The string quartet stopped. Every head in the room turned. There were 112 guests. She remembered that number because she had spent 6 weeks arguing with Kieran about the guest list, and she had memorized it the way she memorized everything that mattered. Precisely, permanently, without sentiment. She said into the microphone, "I think we're done here." Then she picked up the envelope of cash her cousin had given her as a wedding gift, because he always gave cash and always gave it early, walked past the gift table, past the bar, past Dana's mother, who was crying into a napkin, and out through the service entrance into the January air. She had $32 of her own at that point. She made it 47 when she found a 20 in the inside pocket of her coat. Emergency money she had tucked away 6 months ago and forgotten. That was the kind of person Margot Fitch was. She had been putting money in the pockets of coats she might need to run away in since she was 19 years old, when her father had decided his new girlfriend's comfort was more important than his daughter's rent. She had never stopped. She walked 4 blocks before she started shaking. Not crying, just shaking, the kind that comes from adrenaline, leaving your body all at once. She sat on a concrete step outside a closed pharmacy's and breathed until it stopped. Then she pulled out her phone and found a hotel with availability for $49 a night. She was $2 short. She looked at the screen for a long time. Then she opened her email, found the prepaid Visa confirmation her aunt had sent her as an emergency-only gift last Christmas, and used it. She had been saving it. She had thought it was for genuine emergencies. She supposed this qualified. The hotel room was small and smelled like industrial cleaning fluid and carpet that had been wet once and dried improperly. There was a window that looked onto a brick wall. The radiator clicked every few minutes like it was trying to say something. Margot sat on the edge of the bed in her wedding dress and tried to figure out what she actually had. $47. A phone. The clothes on her back and what was in the duffel. She'd had the presence of mind at some point in the preceding weeks to pack a bag and leave it in her car. She had told herself it was because she was staying at the venue the night before. She understood now that some part of her had known. Her apartment, their apartment, had been in Kieran's name because his credit score was better, and she had agreed because she loved him and trusted him, and those are the kinds of decisions you make when you're in love and exhausted and 25 years old. She had paid half the rent for 4 years. She had nothing to show for it legally. Her job was a contract position at a mid-size accounting firm, renewed every 8 months, currently up for review in 3 weeks. She was good at her job. She was very good at her job. She could look at a column of numbers and find the thing that didn't belong the way other people could look at a painting and find the mismatched color. Instinctively, immediately, without effort. Her supervisor had told her twice that she was being considered for a permanent position. He had not yet put that in writing. She had no savings. She and Kieran had been saving together, joint account. She had checked on the way to the hotel and found that the account had been cleaned out 48 hours ago. Kieran had excellent timing. She gave him that. She sat with all of this for a while. The radiator clicked. Outside, a truck passed. Then she picked up the hotel notepad and a pen from the nightstand, and she started making a list, because that was what she did when things fell apart. She made lists. She found the edges of problems and she worked from the edges inward. She had been working from the edges inward her entire life. She was still working through the list at 2 a.m. when someone knocked on her door. Not a gentle knock. Specific. Deliberate. 3 times, evenly spaced, like a person who had never needed to be tentative about anything. Margot sat down. She was not the kind of woman who opened hotel room doors at 2 a.m. to strangers. She was the kind of woman who had a small can of bear spray in the side pocket of her duffel, because she had grown up in northern Alberta and old habits died hard. "Who is it?" she said, not moving from the bed. "Varro." A pause. "Dorian Varro, I'm not here to cause you trouble. You can verify that through the front desk. Ask them to confirm." She picked up her phone and called the front desk. The man on duty sounded mildly apologetic. "He did come in through the lobby, ma'am. He asked us to let you know he's not a threat. He gave us his ID. I can read you the name if you—" "That's fine," Margot said. She crossed to the door. She kept the chain on and opened it 3 inches. The man on the other side was large, not in an obvious way, but in the way that fills a doorframe without trying. Dark coat. No tie. A face that had been handsome once and had since become something else, something more serious, like a building that started as a showpiece and had been used long enough to acquire weight. He was somewhere in his early 40s, maybe. Hard to say. His eyes were grey and very steady, and he looked at her the way people look at spreadsheets, scanning, assessing, finding what he needed. "You don't know me," he said. "That's fine. I know of you. That's not reassuring." I didn't say it was. He reached into his coat pocket slowly, deliberately, and produced a business card. He held it at the gap in the door. "I have a proposal. It's more of a business arrangement than anything else. I'll explain it fully. You can say no." Margot did not take the card. "How do you know where I am?" "My people noticed the situation at the Carrington venue this evening. I was there for a separate event. The venue hosts multiple functions. One of my associates observed what happened and brought it to my attention because—" A pause, brief, like he was choosing the word carefully. "Because your situation aligns with something I need." She stared at him through the 3-inch gap. "That's a very strange thing to say to a woman in a hotel room at 2 a.m. "Yes," he said, "I'm aware of that." He set the card on the doorframe ledge. "I'll be in the lobby. If you want to hear the arrangement, come down. If you don't, I'll leave and you won't hear from me again." He stepped back. "For what it's worth. You handled yourself well tonight. Most people don't." He walked away down the corridor without looking back. Margot stood at the door for a long time. Then she picked up the card. She did not go down in the wedding dress. She changed into jeans and her heaviest sweater and her boots, because this was Calgary in January, and also because she had learned long ago that you negotiate better when you feel like yourself. She kept the bear spray in her coat pocket. He was sitting in the lobby in an armchair that looked undersized for him, reading something on his phone, unbothered by the hour or the fluorescent lights, or the fact that he was wearing a very expensive coat in a $49 hotel lobby. He stood when he saw her, not in a performative way, just stood because she had arrived, and apparently that's how he operated. "Coffee," he said. "There's a machine in the hall." "I know." They sat across from each other at a small table near the vending area with 2 paper cups of something that described itself as coffee. Dorian Varro set a folder on the table. He didn't open it. "I run a company," he said. "Several, technically, but one in particular that operates in a sector that requires discretion. The company is called Varro Holdings. You won't find much about it publicly. What sector? He looked at her steadily. The kind where the books need to be immaculate, and the person who keeps them needs to be someone I can trust completely. Not someone who can be bought away from me. Not someone who is in a position to take risks with the information they handle. You're describing someone with nothing to lose. I'm describing someone who is intelligent, professionally capable, and currently without leverage or attachment. He paused. I don't mean that as an insult. I know you don't. Margot wrapped her hands around the paper cup. What does the arrangement look like? He opened the folder. Inside, a contract, maybe 12 pages, printed in clean, readable type. No legalese designed to obscure. 6 months, he said. You work as my financial controller, private position. You handle account reconciliation, internal auditing, and a few specific projects I'll brief you on as they arise. You'll be paid 3 times the market rate for comparable work. Housing is provided. I have a property in Inglewood that sits empty. You'll have full privacy there. He paused. At the end of 6 months, you receive a severance package that will allow you to start over without the financial constraints you currently have. In exchange, you sign a confidentiality agreement and you don't discuss the work with anyone. Margot had been doing arithmetic since the second sentence. She had a mind that moved in numbers automatically, the way other people moved in words. You said your books need to be kept by someone you can trust completely, she said. You've known about me for approximately 4 hours. I've known your professional record for longer than that. She looked up. That's a strange thing to know about a stranger. I take care to know things, he said. It's one of the reasons I'm still in a position to have this conversation. He met her eyes, and there was something in the steadiness of his gaze that was not warmth and not cruelty, but something in between. The look of a man who had learned that most things were transactional and had made his peace with that. You flagged a discrepancy in the quarterly filings of a company called Ashworth Partners 18 months ago. The discrepancy was $412 across 11 accounts. You found it in a file you weren't assigned to. You brought it to your supervisor, who buried it. He paused. The partners at Ashworth have business ties to one of my competitors. The discrepancy was the surface of something considerably larger. I had reason to notice who found it first. Margot was quiet. She remembered that file. She remembered the number. She always remembered numbers. She had found it in 40 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon because she had been early to a meeting and decided to be useful with the time. She had written it up, handed it to her supervisor, and been told, gently but clearly, to stay in her lane. That company was defrauding a pension fund, she said. Yes, and you knew. I knew about the pension fund. I didn't know about you until I looked into who had caught it. He turned his paper cup slowly on the table. The people I do business with are not always people who operate inside normal structures. That means the people who work for me need to be exceptional at what they do and also need to understand that exceptional is its own form of protection. He looked at her. You're exceptional, Miss Fitch, and right now you're unprotected. I'm offering you both a position and, for the duration of your contract, a degree of protection that you currently don't have. Protection from what? From people like Kieran Marsh deciding he wants the $4,700 in your RRSP that he doesn't legally have access to, but might find a way to complicate. A pause. He has a solicitor. I noticed the email on his phone this afternoon. He may try to claim common law property entitlements. He'd likely fail. But it would cost you time and legal fees you don't currently have. Margot felt something go cold and then very clear in the center of her chest. You read his email. One of my people noticed his phone was accessible during the confusion at the venue. Varro said it plainly, without apology. I don't expect you to find that comfortable. I'm not presenting myself as someone who operates within conventional limits. I'm presenting myself as someone who is honest about what he is and what he needs. She looked at him for a long time. The thing about Margot Fitch was that she had spent her entire adult life being underestimated by people who expected her to be emotional where they were rational, impulsive where they were measured. She was not emotional. She was not impulsive. She was, at her core, very much like the numbers she worked with. She saw patterns where others saw noise. She found the thing that didn't belong, and she made decisions based on what was actually there, rather than what she wished were there. What was actually there? A man who was clearly operating outside legal norms, who had done her the unusual courtesy of being completely transparent about that. A contract with readable language, a 6-month term, a financial outcome that would change her situation materially and permanently if it was real. What she wished were there, a simpler option. There wasn't one. She had made the list. She knew, "I want to read the full contract," she said. Of course, tonight, I expected nothing less. He pushed the folder toward her. She read it. All 12 pages. She took 45 minutes. He sat across from her and did not speak, and did not look impatient, and did not check his phone. He drank his machine coffee and waited, and she found that she respected that without wanting to. There were 2 clauses she wanted changed. She told him which ones and why. He listened. He agreed to both without negotiating. She signed it at 3:47 in the morning, with her back straight and her jaw set, and the $47 still in her pocket, because she believed in keeping records of where you started. The house in Inglewood was real. That had been her first concern. Arriving the next afternoon in a cab with her duffel bag and the formal wear she'd had to go back to the hotel room to pick up. She'd left it in a heap on the floor the night before and felt obscurely guilty about that, because the dress was rented. The house was a narrow 2-story on a quiet street, brick exterior, well kept, clearly not lived in recently but maintained. The key worked. The heat was on. The refrigerator had been stocked with basics. She stood in the kitchen for a full minute, looking at a carton of milk and a block of cheddar and some eggs, and she felt something complicated move through her that she didn't examine too closely. Someone had known she was coming. Someone had been told to prepare. That was the first real evidence that Dorian Varro's world had a reach she hadn't fully imagined at 2 in the morning over machine coffee. She unpacked her duffel. She made a list of everything she owned, because that's what you do when you're starting over. You take inventory. Then she opened the secure laptop that had been left on the kitchen table with a handwritten note, password, in envelope. Secure comms only on this machine. You'll have full access to the accounts by 9 tomorrow. His handwriting was angular and deliberate and did not waste space. She made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table and opened the laptop. The books were a revelation, not because they were corrupt, though there were things in them that operated in significant gray areas, and she noted every single one of them with the precision of a person who had been trained to find exactly those things. They were a revelation because they were complex in a way she hadn't encountered outside of the very largest firms, and because somewhere underneath the complexity, someone had tried to build a system that was genuinely organized. It had started as something coherent, and then grown in the way things grow when the person who designed them can't stop adding to them. Sprawling, dense, holding together in some places and fraying in others. She could fix it. She knew that within the first 6 hours. She worked for 14 hours that first day. She forgot to eat lunch. At 7 in the evening she found an error in a reconciliation file that amounted to $38,000 sitting unaccounted for in a subsidiary account, not stolen, just lost in the architecture. She filed a note about it, precise and unemotional, and sent it through the secure system. At 7:15 she received a reply. Confirmed. Address it. No greeting, no acknowledgement that she'd been working since 8 in the morning. She noted the efficiency and found she didn't mind it. She addressed the $38,000. She found 4 other things while doing so, and fixed those too. She sent a summary at 9:30. The reply came at 9:32. Good. She turned off the laptop and ate cereal standing at the counter because she'd forgotten to think about dinner, and she went to bed in a house that wasn't hers and slept, immediately and completely, for the first time in several months. She met him in person, properly, not in a hotel lobby at 2 in the morning on day 9. She had been summoned, which was the only accurate word for it. A message through the secure system with an address, a time, and the word meeting, and nothing further. The address was a building in the Beltline that had no signage and a lobby with one security desk and a man behind it who looked at her with the flat attention of someone who has assessed threats professionally for a long time. He called up. He handed her a visitor badge. He did not smile. The office on the 14th floor was large and spare. No art, no personal objects. A desk with 2 monitors and a view of the city that Margot suspected cost considerably more than the desk. Varro was standing at the window when she came in. He turned, and she saw, in daylight and without a paper cup as a social prop, that he was older than she'd estimated and also more tired than she'd registered. The kind of tired that has settled in permanently, become part of the structure of a face. He had a scar along his left jaw that disappeared into his collar. She didn't ask about it. She didn't ask about a lot of things because she had learned early that you gather information by being quiet and watching, not by asking people to explain themselves. "Sit," he said. She sat. "The work you've done this week is better than anything I've seen from anyone I've paid considerably more," he said. He said it the way he said everything, directly, without warmth, as though the observation was a data point rather than a compliment. The accounts were designed by someone who thought in 3 dimensions, but had to work in 2, she said. It's not surprising they developed problems. He looked at her. That's a specific observation. The architecture of the subsidiary structure suggests someone who understood the full scope of the operation and was trying to account for all of it simultaneously, but the reporting requirements forced it into a linear format it wasn't built for. You can see it in the way the flags accumulate, always at the interface points. A pause. "I designed those systems," he said. She met his eyes. "I know." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. The suggestion that one was structurally possible. And you should let me rebuild the interface, Leia. It won't touch the core. It'll make the flags visible in real time instead of after the fact. You'll lose approximately 3 days of normal operations while I run parallel systems to verify the transition." She paused. "I already wrote the proposal. It's in the system." He was quiet for a moment. "You wrote the proposal before you knew whether I'd approve the idea. I wrote it because it was the correct thing to do. Whether you approve it is your decision. I've done my job either way." He looked at her for a long time. She didn't look away. "Approve it," he said. "Run it." The days settled into a shape she hadn't expected. Work, which was absorbing and technically demanding in a way that made the previous 4 years of her professional life feel like practice. The house, which she had begun to make subtly hers by buying 3 plants, and a proper coffee maker, and a second-hand rug for the front hall, and Dorian Varro, who occupied the periphery of her daily existence as a series of messages in the secure system, and occasional meetings in the 14th floor office that were always about the work and never about anything else. He was not what she had expected. She had expected someone opaque and theatrical. She'd formed a picture in her mind on that first night that involved more visible menace. He was menacing, certainly. She saw it in the way his staff moved around him, in the way conversations stopped when he entered rooms. In a particular phone call, she'd inadvertently been in the room for at the end of week 3, where he had spoken in a voice that was entirely even and entirely quiet, and clearly terrified the person on the other end. But it was functional menace, professional, turned off when it wasn't needed, like a tool. What she hadn't expected was the precision. He thought the way she thought, in structures, in contingencies, in the elegant efficiency of systems built to handle failure. He had read every summary she sent him. She knew because he replied to specifics she had buried in footnotes, things she had included as thorough habit and not expected anyone to actually read. In week 5, he replied to a footnote about a minor discrepancy in a subsidiary's vendor payments with, "I noticed this 3 years ago. I couldn't find it in the structure. Show me where it is." She showed him. It took 2 hours of back and forth on the secure system, and at the end he sent, "I've been looking at this wrong for 3 years. "You found it in 5 weeks," she replied. You built the system. I'm just reading it. A pause. Then, that's not a small thing. She didn't know what to do with that. She filed it away. The trouble started in week 7. It started as a discrepancy. Of course it did, because this is how trouble always started for Margot Fitch, with a number that didn't belong. A transfer, mid-sized, routed through one of the subsidiary accounts she managed, time-stamped on a Tuesday at 3:14 in the morning, authorized under a set of credentials she recognized as Varro's, but structured in a way that didn't match any of his previous authorizations. She looked at it for a long time. Then, she pulled the preceding 6 months of transfers and found 2 more with the same structural fingerprint. Same odd hour. Same unusual routing. Same slight asymmetry in the authorization code. She was sitting at the kitchen table at midnight on a Thursday, the glow of the laptop the only light in the house, and she understood with the absolute certainty she reserved for things she had checked and double-checked. Someone inside the organization had access to Varro's credentials. They were not using them to steal money. They were using them to move information. The transfers were nominal amounts, the kind of sums that wouldn't trigger review, but the routing paths they took would, to the right person, constitute a map of the company's full account structure. Someone was mapping the accounts from the inside, and doing it slowly enough, carefully enough, that they had been invisible for at least 6 months. She sat with this for a while. The sensible thing, the safe thing, the thing a woman in her position with a 6-month contract and no other options should probably do, was to document it, file it in the secure system, and let him handle it. She documented it. She was thorough. She was always thorough. Then she spent the next 4 hours tracing the routing paths herself, because she couldn't not. Because she had the ability and the information was there, and she did not know how to see something that didn't belong and look away from it. By 4 in the morning, she had a complete map of every transfer, every path, and a profile of the pattern that pointed, not conclusively but significantly, toward one of the 3 people who had full administrative access to the system. She sent it at 4:12 in the morning. At 4:15, her phone rang. Not a message through the secure system, her personal phone. "You should be asleep," Varro said. "You should, too." A pause. "How long did this take you? 4 hours for the trace?" "About 40 minutes to understand what I was looking at. I've had 3 different security reviews in the last 8 months." His voice was very controlled. She had learned to hear what it was controlling. "None of them found this. They were looking for money moving out. This is information moving out. Different shape." She paused. "The profile I built, it points to someone in your inner administration. I can send you the methodology if you want to check my work. I don't need to check your work." Another pause. Longer. Margot. It was the first time he had used her given name. She noted it the way she noted everything, precisely, without sentiment, while the significance of it moved quietly through her. "Yes," she said. "This is not a small thing you've done. I found a discrepancy. I followed it. It's what I do. You followed it into something that puts you at risk." His voice was still controlled. "The person this profile points to is aware that there is now a financial controller with better access than any of my previous staff. If they haven't noticed you yet, they'll notice the 4-hour session trace I just ran," she said. "Yes, I know." Silence. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have stopped at the documentation." "I didn't." "No," he said. "You didn't." A long pause. "The house has a security system. The panel is in the front hall closet. I'm going to have someone come by in the morning to upgrade it." Another pause. "You should sleep. I'll try." "Margot." His voice was different now, not warmer exactly, but something had moved in it. This organization has had 30 years of people working for it. No one has ever done in 7 weeks what you just did at 4 in the morning because they couldn't look away from a number. She didn't say anything for a moment. "That's because most people are afraid of what they'll find," she said. "And you're not." She thought about that honestly. "I'm afraid of it," she said. "I just think not knowing is worse." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who have recognized something in the same direction at the same time. "Sleep," he said, and ended the call. She thought about calling her aunt, sometime in week 8. She thought about it for about 10 minutes and then didn't, because she couldn't explain where she was or what she was doing, and because the thing she most wanted to say, "I'm okay, actually. I might be more okay than I've been in years," would raise more questions than it answered. She was okay. That was the strange part. She was living in a borrowed house working for a man who operated in the kind of business that didn't file standard corporate tax returns, and she was sleeping through the night, and the work was the most demanding and interesting work she had ever done, and she had 3 plants on the windowsill, and she knew all their watering schedules by heart. The inside threat was identified and handled. She didn't ask exactly how, and Varro didn't explain, and she understood that there were parts of his world she would see clearly and parts she would not, and she had made her peace with the geometry of that. He had told her, briefly, that the matter was resolved. She had said, "Good." That had been the whole conversation. In week 9, he came to the house. Not announced, a knock at the door at 7 in the evening, and when she opened it, he was standing on her front step with his coat on and his hands in his pockets, and he looked, for the first time since she'd met him, like a man who wasn't entirely sure what he was doing there. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. "You're never just in the neighborhood," she said. "No," he agreed. "I'm not." She let him in because it was January, and because she had known, somewhere underneath the structure of the contract and the secure system and the professional distance she'd maintained with the same discipline she maintained everything, that this was going to happen. Not necessarily this specifically, but something. The shape of something. She made tea because that was what she did when she needed to do something with her hands. He sat at the kitchen table and looked at her 3 plants and didn't say anything for a while. "The contract ends in 3 weeks, he said finally. "I know," she said. "I've been preparing the transition documentation." The transition documentation. He looked at her. "For whoever takes over the accounts." A pause. "I don't want to bring in someone else," he said. She set down the kettle. She turned. She looked at him the way she looked at numbers, directly, without softening the examination. "Then say so clearly," she said. "Don't dress it up. I don't need that, and I don't think you do either." He looked back at her with those grey eyes that had always seen her as something worth counting, worth accounting for, not an object, not a resource exactly, but something he had assigned real weight to in the ledger of things that mattered. "I want you to stay," he said. "New contract, better terms, your name on the actual organizational structure. Not hidden." A pause. He stopped, started again. "I'm not someone who does this well." "I know," she said. "I'm asking anyway." She thought about Kieran, who had been charming and easy, and who she had trusted completely, and who had emptied a joint bank account. She thought about the $47 and the hotel room and the rented wedding dress she still hadn't returned because the shop it belonged to had left 2 voicemails she hadn't been emotionally ready to deal with. She thought about a man who had read every footnote she had ever written and called her at 4 in the morning because he was worried, and said this is not a small thing like he meant it. "New contract," she said. "I write the terms." Something shifted in his face, that structural suggestion of a smile, more definite this time. "Of course," he said. "I'll need to return a wedding dress first. I'll arrange a car. I don't need a car. I need 20 minutes and a garment bag." She picked up her tea, and the name of a good solicitor, for the lease agreement. "I know one." I assumed. She sat down across from him at the kitchen table, in her borrowed house with her 3 plants and her second-hand rug, and she looked at him steadily. "I'm not easy," she said. "I'll find every discrepancy you have. I'll tell you about them. I won't look the other way because it's complicated." "I know," he said, "and I'm not afraid of you. I know that too." He paused. "It's one of the things." She understood what he meant. She didn't say so. She filed it, as she filed everything, precisely, permanently, in a place she'd be able to find it again when she needed it. Outside, Calgary in winter was dark by 5, and the temperature had dropped to somewhere ugly, and the city looked, as it always did from the inside of a warm room, like a problem that had organized itself into something almost beautiful. She had $47 in her pocket on the worst night of her life, She had run out of options and run toward the only open door, which had been offered by a man with grey eyes and a 12-page contract, and the unusual honesty of someone who had decided long ago that pretending was more expensive than the truth. She did not know how the next contract would read. She would write it herself, so she would know every clause. She did know this. She had never, in all the years of careful preparation and coat pocket money and lists made at midnight, imagined that the thing waiting at the end of running would feel like this, like arriving somewhere that had been built to hold exactly the weight she was carrying, and had been waiting, without knowing it, for her to come through the door.